Welcome to the afternoon program of the 150th anniversary of Beulah Presbyterian Church. Thanks to Richard for playing these antique organs and having the beautiful music. The prelude will be by Glory Bells, and the music, there's going to be a change in the program. The music will continue with the Glory Bells doing all their singing right at the first of the program. So I'll turn it over to Richard.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead now and play, of course, what's listed, I Will Arise and Go to Jesus, and we're going to go follow that up with the medley of hymns that's listed later on in the program, and do it all so we can get them out of the hot balcony.
thank you, folks. If you want to come down where it's cooler, we'll wait on you. While they're coming down, our next hymn will be hymn number 270 in the red hymnal, Beulah Land. 270 in the red hymnal. Be seated. Reverend Fletcher Hutchison from the Circleville Presbyterian Church, who has been our session moderator, will lead us in prayer.
Good afternoon. Let us pray. Most gracious God, we think of words that Robert Robinson wrote in Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing. Here I raise my Ebenezer, hither by thy help I'm come, and I hope by thy good pleasure safely to arrive at home. Ebenezer is a stone of help that the prophet Samuel set up to mark the place where you provided your people a victory. In our spirits, we set up an Ebenezer as we celebrate this 150th anniversary. Indeed, it is your loving help that has brought us to this day. We praise you for your grace and goodness to Beulah Presbyterian Church, to us. Thank you for continuing to lead us homeward to yourself. Through Jesus Christ, our Savior. Amen.
We will now have the first 125-year history by Richard Simmons.
Well, this is my third celebration. I was here with the 100th and the 125th and now the 150th. And this has to be the hottest. Has to be the hottest. So I'll try to be quick with this and not make you sit in this uncomfortable place too long. We're going to go over the first 100th and then the 25 years, and then Karen will follow with the last 25. This 100th was written by Francis Pullins, and we do have copies of all these. Don't let me forget to put them down for you to take if you'd like to have them. But Francis Pullins compiled this, so I'm reading some of the original from her and adding comments if I have them. And then Karen has written the 25th. So Rehoboth Methodist was the first house of worship to be built in this immediate area. It was located on what is now Route 604 near the home of the late Miss Wilda Bird. Both Methodists and Presbyterians worshiped there. And so this organ was the original organ from that church. And Ramona, you could probably tell us about it, but Gene Bird moved the church up to his home. There was a shop on the CCC Road. And so this organ was taken into his house and care. So we still have that. So it's not uncommon that a lot of buildings were moved in Mill Gap in that area. A lot of homes were just moved. So Dr. William Price was the first Presbyterian minister to hold regular services and was the leading spirit in the organization of a Presbyterian church in this area. He had this in mind since 1860 when he first visited the little Presbyterian group, but his dream was not realized until 1873. The Presbytery of Lexington, at its session in Stanton, Virginia, May 2nd, 1873, appointed Reverend C.H.C., G.B. Strickler, and W.T. Price. And Monterey people, I think you all have a stained glass window with Reverend C., don't you? Look when you go back and see. I think you do. William T. Price set this committee to visit Rehoboth Church on Back Creek, Highland County, Virginia, administer the sacrament of the Lord's Supper, and if the way seemed clear, to organize a Presbyterian church. This committee met at the appointed place on Friday, June 6, 1873. Morning and afternoon services were held, and on Saturday, June 7, 1873, a church was duly organized under the name of Rehoboth Church. There were 13 charter members, and they were as followed. By certificate from other churches, 10 persons, 5 from Pisgah, James H. Bird, Mrs. Mary P. Bird, Mrs. Mary Irwin, Miss Eliza Dever, and J. Kenny Campbell. From Mossy Creek Church, Miss Annie Ruckman. From Warm Springs Church, Miss Mary J. Campbell and Miss Elmira Ruckman. From M.E. Church South, Miss Maggie Irwin. From Lewisburg, West Virginia. Miss Millie C. Bird receiving Mrs. Millie C. Bird and receiving 2 on profession of faith, namely William Matthews Campbell, and Miss Cornelia Irwin. J. Kenny Campbell was elected, ordained, and installed as the first ruling elder of the new church. The pulpit was vacant for 3 years, with the exception of the summer of 1874, when Reverend Frank Lewis supplied the church for 3 months. On January 1st, 1876, Reverend A.F. Laird arranged to preach at Rehoboth once a month. This arrangement continued for 1 year. During the year of 1876, 2 more elders were elected, making a total of 3 elders. At the close of this year, the membership had increased from the original 13 to 43. Before many months passed, history tells us that instead of Rehoboth Church, the Presbyterians were holding services at what was known as the Hall. It was a frame building located on the land of Samuel Ruckman and was known by various names such as Temperance Hall, Valley Hall, Ruckman Hall, or just the Hall. It was used for any project the community cared to sponsor. The session meetings were conducted in the homes of the members. And Chip told you this morning where that was located, just up the road here, so it was probably closer for them to meet there, so they did. Soon after organization came the question of a church building. 2 Presbyterian ladies were especially influential in stimulating interest in the church building, namely Mrs. D.V. Ruckman and Mrs. W.M. Campbell. The country had just passed through the ordeal of war and its subsequent hardships. No one was wealthy, and many were pitifully poor. In talking the matter over, all agreed that only a commodious church could meet the demand of the time, one that could take care of the crowds that always gravitated toward the scene of a preaching service. They must have it large enough to hold all that could come from Wash Gums and John Page's down the creek as far as Roger Hickman's. At the time, the Methodists too were thinking of building a new church. Within their group was a considerable controversy over the question of the building site. 2 men, Anson Wade and Alex Gilmore, withdrew their support from the Methodist building project and offered to help Presbyterians on condition that the new church be a union instead of an all-Presbyterian church. In this way, there would perhaps be a chance to build a really commodious church. And I looked that up. Does anyone know what commodious means? What does it mean?
Holds a lot of people.
Roomy and comfortable. Are those pews comfortable? And the idea of unity and fellowship with a sister denomination was also appealing, because the interests and friendships of 2 membership groups had always been closely interwoven. D.V. Ruckman gave 2 acres of land lots, which was surveyed by Sid Ruckman. Beulah Church deeded date 27, 1876, conveyed a lot to D.V. Ruckman and his wife Anna Ruckman to the duly appointed trustees. It is situated in a gap between 2 towering mountains known as Ruckman's Gap. And there's a copy of the deed above this piano in the hall, fellowship hall back here. Charles Wade was appointed chairman of the building committee, and other members were D.V. Ruckman, John W. Bird, and Anson Wade. Charles Wade was especially enthusiastic over the work and insisted upon being the first to strike a lick of work for the new church. He cut the first tree, a large white oak, on his own land. The foundation was 4 white oak seals, great logs hewed from the largest, straightest trees available. 1 seal to a tree, cut about 4 feet longer than the dimensions of the building. Seals were at least 12 inches square and hewn with a broad axe by Charles Wade and Adam McGuffin. The seals were hauled in with a pair of white oxen hitched to an ox cart. For some reason, these 2 very large oxen were not thought sufficient in themselves. We have handed down to us a story of an off-looking team hitched to this cart to bring the seals from the Holcomb place, owned jointly by Charles Wade and D.V. Ruckman. In front of the oxen were Peg, the mule, Mr. Ruckman's riding mule, and Patty, his black horse. The best sawmill was located 2 to 4 miles southwest of Dunmore, West Virginia, so the lumber was hauled principally from Pocahontas County. The best quality white pine was to be had there. A man named Maisie sawed the lumber, and it was hauled by E.A. Wade, F.A. Doyle, and L. Callison. Newt Lowry did some of the sawing on an old-style up-and-down saw, as there were no circular saws at that time. The framing was of spruce, or hemlock, his more modern name. It was sawed on a sawmill in the Gap and some at Roger Hickman's on Back Creek. The framing is about 2 by 4 or 2 by 6. So this sawmill was located up here in the Gap, and if you go to the Rurton ground and cross the bridge, you can see the waterway, we call it a raceway, that led down to that mill, and that's that nature walk that you're taking from the Rurtons that led down to this up and down sawmill. Construction of the building was begun in November 1876, as completed in a little more than a year. The size of the completed building was 32 by 48 feet and would seat comfortably 380 people. The first roof was shingled, but in later years was replaced by a metal roof. The hardware and nails were furnished by S.B. Rexroad. That's Wanda, and that's your grandfather, right? He had the store at where Mike Armstrong?
Yes.
His house is. The workmen on the building were Sid Ruckman, George Irving, Bird Howdyshell, Tim Schultz, and I didn't check with the Schultzes, but isn't that your great-great-great-grandfather, Sherry? Wasn't there? Tim, Virgil, Ashby, Albert, is that how it goes? Okay. Fillmore Campbell, James R. Irwin, Newt Lowry, and Adam McGuffin. When the church was nearing completion, there was considerable discussion about a pulpit, how and where one could be gotten that would be worthy of the place in this lovely new church. Mr. Sidney Ruckman, the architect under whose supervision Beulah Church was built, told them not to worry. "I'll see that you have a pulpit," he answered. After the church was finished, he designed and built a beautiful and unusual pulpit from walnut and cherry wood. It was ornated with carvings shaped with the penknife and fitted together like mosaics. He was assisted by George Irvin. The pulpit stands 150 years later, just as it was designed for the new church in the Gap. So that's this pulpit. D.V. Ruckman made arrangements for purchasing the organ, which was a Mason and Hamlin, and also contributed a large part of the cost. It was hauled from Stanton on a spring wagon to the site of the new church. The story is told that the wagon upset on a curve just east of West Augusta, tipping the organ onto the ground, but it was not harmed. In later years, around 1929 or 30, the organ was replaced by a piano, and it was sold to the late D.A.S. Vaden for use in the Brushy Ridge Schoolhouse for worship services. The whereabouts of the organ is not known. So the Brushy Ridge School, the building's still up there. It was Hebner land, but I don't know who owns it now. Who?
Payne.
Okay. On February 17, 1878, a congregational meeting was held in the new church, pursuant to notice given for the purpose of selecting a name for this church. Following the sermon and benediction, Colonel Anson C. Wade was called to preside, whereupon J.K. Campbell moved that the church be called Mill Gap Church, and D.V. Ruckman moved Beulah and requested Reverend Laird to read the passage from Isaiah 62:4. "Thou shalt no more be termed desolate, but thou shalt be called Hephzibah, and the land Beulah, for Jehovah delighteth in thee." A vote was taken to which of these three names should be selected, resulting in the choosing of Beulah by a vote of less 7 of being unanimous. The church was thereupon named Beulah. Beulah Church was dedicated on June 7, 1878, to the joint property of the Presbyterian and Methodist Church South. Dr. Rosebrough from Mossy Creek delivered the sermon, after which R.J.J. Krickenberg of the M.E. Church South conducted the dedicatory service. His text was from Ephesians 5:25-27. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it, that he might sanctify and cleanse it with the washing of water by the word, that he might present it to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that it should be holy and without blemish. The cost of the building was $1,800, and there was $290 still owing on the day of the dedication, but the entire debt was liquidated by the offering on that day. The manse building at the same time was built at the same time as the church. It consisted of 4 rooms, a shed, later being used for the kitchen. The house was built at one end of the 2-acre lot. The original manse faced east, and the road ran on the east side of it. It was built by Sidney Ruckman. The deed was dated January 13, 1880, and read as follows: north of and above Beulah Church, so long and so long only as it shall be used for this purpose. It was conveyed from D.V. Ruckman and his wife Annie. During the pastorate of B.L. Wood, the question came up of moving the manse. The road had been changed so that the house no longer faced the road. Andrew Ryder and his brother from Greenbank, West Virginia, were hired to move the structure. And the plan was to move it to the front of the lot and turn it to face the road, and also to build a new L. They had moved it about 10 feet when a seal jerked out from under the structure and it came tumbling down. They salvaged what material could be used and built a new and larger manse. In 1960, Lexington Presbytery made Beulah Church a part of the Monterey Group, and as the building was no longer needed to be used as a manse, it was sold and is now privately owned. There has been one outpost under the supervision of Beulah Church. The building that was formerly the Campbell Schoolhouse and is located in the Valley Center area was bought for $50. Mr. W.P. Campbell gave the lot upon which it stood, deed dated August 28, 1900. It was deeded outright as a chapel of Beulah Church, and on May 18, 1902, it was dedicated as Baraka Chapel. The sermon and dedicatory prayer was by Reverend C.J. Boppel, pastor of Beulah. He had been asked to select a name for the chapel, and his name in the memory of the Missions Church in Africa he had served for about a year. In March of 1944, Baraka Chapel was sold to Reverend Edgar Potts, who was at that time pastor of the Central Methodist Church in Stanton, Virginia. Reverend Potts and his family have since used it as their summer home. So this pulpit and this organ came from Baraka Chapel, and there's a picture of Baraka on this organ. Reverend and Mrs. Smith had very sentimental feelings about the church building. They planted the maple trees around the church. They chose the maples because they're long-lived. And I think there's one left, right? I think there's one left. Early in 1895, Reverend Smith held a wonderful meeting at Beulah. All the country, that should probably be county, attended. It was stormy, cold, and snowed throughout this evening, which began the last Sunday in January and lasted throughout the month of February. Snow was on the ground the entire time. People went on sleds, gathered them along the road until the sleds were full. The roads were a sheet of ice during the entire meeting. The night it closed, a thaw came, and Bird Run overflowed into the sleds. Mr. E.A. Wade, then living at his lower place near Valley Center Post Office, arranged a comfortable mode of travel, a 2-horse sled on which he fastened a set of wagon bows which formed a frame for a canopy of carpet under which his load of churchgoers could ride comfortably, protected from the storm. He would load up as many passengers as possible. Work was begun on the addition of the church of Sunday school rooms and recreational facilities in May of 1957 and was completed in early fall, with the exception of the indoor plumbing and furnishings, which had been done at different intervals. We now have a completed addition, heated electrically, and fully equipped kitchen. The sanctuary has all been converted to electric heat and carpet laid, pews painted, and cushions added. The pulpit chairs were recently recovered in the memory of Mrs. Mary Schultz. The altar which set was given in memory of Wayne Huffman. So Cappy mentioned the building of this back here, how the lumber was sold at Schultz and Schaefer Mill, and Hale and Meade Wilson completed the carpentry work on that. The red chairs that are used in the primary room were gotten by Mrs. J.T. Williams. She made little reed baskets woven around pickle jars and put the flowers in them to be used as decorations when the auxiliary held an ice cream supper. At the close of the evening, she sold the baskets and used the proceeds to buy the chairs. In 1945, the Methodist Church South sold their half interest in Beulah for $800. The Home Missions Committee, having agreed to give $500 of the amount, on November 11, 1945, the deed was signed and Beulah Church became entirely Presbyterian. The first wedding to be solemnized at Beulah Church was on Wednesday, June the 12th, 1889, by the Reverend D.M. Layton. It was a double wedding of both brothers. David O. Bird was wed to Lily Shoemate, and Anson Bird was wed to Mrs. Mary Campbell. As a note of interest, Mr. D.O. Bird, the long surviving member of this group, is a guest in the Stanton Nursing Home, having reached the age of 107 years this past April 30th. I'm not sure Ramona, how old did he get to be?
I think he probably lived about a year after that.
108?
He lived to be 107, that's all I know.
Okay. The session book states that the April 20th, 1878, that there were at that time 2 Sabbath schools within the bounds of Beulah Church, one under the control of the session, the other a union Sunday school. The Sunday school organization is as old as the church organization. It was first held in the hall. It was well attended and was conducted under the joint auspices of the Presbyterian and Methodist churches. The Presbyterian Sabbath School was officially organized June 3, 1877 in the hall. Superintendent and assistant superintendent were appointed. The school continued here until the church building was erected. Sunday school has been held regularly since that time, even during the periods when the church was without a pastor. The first women's organization was Ladies Missionary Society, which was organized by Reverend Laird in 1873. Miss Laird was president and Mrs. Annie Irvin was secretary-treasurer. There were probably about 10 members of the young women's and girls. An organization of this kind was a new thing to all of them. The money was kept in a little box. Dues were 10 cents per month. Sometimes she would wonder where the 10 cents was coming from. In July 1923, a meeting of the Women's Foreign Missionary Society was held at Beulah Church, at which time Miss Andrew Jones and Miss Katie Gibson from Monterey explained the auxiliary plan. By unanimous vote, the group was reorganized as the Women's Auxiliary. It continued to function under the name until 1948, when the church governing bodies changed the name of the women's groups. It has since been known as the Women of the Church. Other than names previously mentioned, there have been so many family names identified with Beulah Church, such people as the Lightners, Campbells, Ruckmans, Irvins, Birds with a Y, Devers, and others who have given of both their time and talents to the building of Beulah. We should not fail to mention that Mrs. C.C. Burns, one of the faithful, was the treasurer of the women's organization for more than 30 years. She held the same office longer than any other member. And she lived in Jesse, your house, Mrs. Burns and Mr. C.C. Burns, and he was a long-time elder. He served as elder from 1916 to 1947. And I remember Viola telling me one time about Miss C.C. Burns. Of course, they rode their wagon to church, and she always carried a vase of flowers for the church service and brought them with her. 100 years after the founding of Beulah, we today are humbly thankful and proud of our little church in the Gap, the improvements that have been made over the years, and the fellowship and spiritual guidance so many have known in our worship and associations that have entered around Beulah. Today we have a house of worship which we are justly proud. May we all zealously guard and keep our love of Beulah and the traditions passed to each succeeding generations. So that ends the 100th. So let me quickly highlight the events from 100 years up to 125. So in 1977, aluminum siding was installed on the church and the fellowship hall. The old flues were torn out because this church used to have 2 aisles. You came in those 2 doors back there, and it had 2 aisles, one long in the middle, and there were 2 wood stoves here. So those were removed in 1977, the flues. In November 1985, a flood tore through our community, causing much damage. The bridge on 84 broke into pieces, and the bridge to the church suffered damage. Temporary repairs were made by the church members. In 1986, A.R. Coffey and Sons constructed a new bridge for $7,700. $500 came from the Presbytery Disaster Fund. The rest came from the women's of the church, friends, and a collection of $677.87 on March 30th during worship services. This sound system that has been upgraded, but still the speakers in the back are still here, was given in memory of Carolyn Hook, Mosee, by Mr. and Mrs. Adolph Hook. In honor of Mrs. Evelyn Dever, our church pianist for many, many years, it was over 70 years. Stained glass windows in the vestibule around the door were installed, and this baby grand piano was purchased. The handicap ramp was constructed into the church social hall in memory of Mrs. Alta Brock by her son and daughter-in-law Joe and Phyllis Brock. A Sessions Minute book was donated by Grace P. King in memory of her husband, Martin Ellis King, an elder of the church. On July 14, 1991, the family of Rebecca Thomas donated a bell to the church in her memory. Many blinds were installed in the dining room and Sunday school rooms in memory of Alta Brock. In July of 1993, the steeple was restored in loving memory and honor of Albert A. and Jesse M. Pullen and Boyd G. and Viola Pullen, Rex Road, by Manfred and Linda Freeman. In recent years, we have installed shutters in the sanctuary, installed replacement windows, and floor tile in the education building, a dishwasher and microwave in the kitchen. Mary Puffenbarger and Sarah Shiflett donated a considerable amount of money toward the purchase of the new organ in the church. The rest of the cost was donated by other individuals. Karen, I think that takes us up to your part.
And no, I didn't memorize. In 1999, we began with 54 active members. Everyone was anticipating the new century starting, some with excitement and others with uncertainty of what the future might bring. The computer age was upon us. Be it a blessing or a curse, is still questioned by some people. The past 25 years, we have found new ways to embrace some of the old uses of the internet. We have made many repairs and upgrades to the church building and property over the past 25 years. Some of these are, and if you get a copy of this, you will see that I did one of the longest running sentences perhaps known to man. I'm not sure that my English grammar teacher, Mrs. Heiner, would have appreciated all this. But some of these are, we did some new lights and ceiling fans here in the sanctuary. A picnic shelter was built in memory of Jim Hefner. A table in the vestibule was built by Pat Lowry to honor Mary Carolyn Hook for all of her years, 25 years in fact, as serving as church treasurer. The new communion cloths or paraments were donated by B.J. Robertson in honor of Abby and Lawrence Flagg. Window glazing and glass repair. Joe Simmons repaired the front steps until replacements of concrete steps could be done through donations in memory of Irene Huffman. Pine flooring was donated by Jason Ford and put down in the choir loft here to help with acoustics. At least that's what they said it did. I don't know about stuff like that. David Blanchard made and donated the cross up here in honor of Viola Rexroth. Motion lights were put along the front walk. Joe Brock installed solar lights on the bridge. 40 new hymnals and 40 of the red hymnals that we were using were ordered, paid in part by Beulah P. Rexroth Memorial Funds. Excuse me. A new Christmas communion cloths, paraments, candles, and communion cups were purchased in honor of Jesse Lowry. Handicapped commodes were installed in the bathroom by Pat Lowry. Organ speakers and pipes were installed in front of the church. Karen DeVore presented a new session book to the session in honor of her father, Sidney Lowry Jr. New speakers were purchased and installed. A new fence was built around the churchyard by adjacent landowner, Sherry Sollenberger. A new church sign was made and erected by Route 84 in memory of Sidney Lowry Jr. Sharon Brock donated 75 new padded folding chairs in memory of John Brock. Wilkie Renovation replaced the sanctuary windows. Also, with Derek Simmons' technological knowledge, new equipment was purchased for Beulah to live stream services during and after the pandemic. Another fireproof cabinet was purchased, and finally, for now, the kitchen renovation made possible from a generous donation from Linda R. and Manfred Freeman in honor of her mother, Viola P. Rexroth. This has been accomplished because of the dedicated planning and many man-hours by Richard Simmons. Donna Hook made several generous donations of kitchen equipment. We would be remiss not to thank Vernon and Gail Simmons for indoor and outdoor cleaning and upkeep of the churchyard. Joe and Ruby Simmons were honored with a plaque for their 60th wedding anniversary for all of the many, many years of service to Beulah Church. The women of the church are now Presbyterian women and continue to meet now by WebEx and provide to many charitable causes. Because we have very few who are able to help with the root suppers, our primary moneymaker, Richard Simmons has been the chief cook and supply getter for the meals. He then gives the PW, Presbyterian women, the profit from the meals for our treasury, enabling us to continue with our charitable endeavors. We no longer have our annual ingathering, which was also a big contributor to the treasury. Instead of ingathering, we have done several spaghetti suppers. We began having service back in the church in 2021 after the pandemic, and also provided live streaming services for those who chose to watch from home. Live streaming is still provided for each Sunday service as well for Sunday school. This has proven to be very helpful for those living far away from Highland County and those who aren't feeling well or are housebound. At the end of 2023, there were 37 active members. We have gained some new members, but lost so many to death in the past 25 years. Even though there are fewer members, we do have part-time residents who are active in our church and our community members who attend. We continue to be the gathering place of the community and strive to be a welcoming and caring church family. That concludes that.
Thanks to Richard and Karen for this history. Let us continue by standing and singing hymn number 154 in the red hymnal, God Be With You.
Did you want to do any
Oh.
short reflections?
You want to do them after?
I would do that before.
Okay, anybody, yeah. Sorry, I jumped ahead. We will now have a short time for anybody that has any reflections that they want to make, remarks. If you do, please come forward if you feel so. Everybody happy with the way things are? The history we've heard? And yes.
I always remember Beulah and the men of the church and the in-gathering and all the support that they gave my daughter and my family in 1991. With Viola Rexroad coming with me, sitting, when her family was sitting down and having prayer for Nancy. And they gave the year, I guess it would be 91 or 92, they gave the whole in-gathering benefit money to us to help pay for her hospital up in Cumberland.
Okay.
And Reverend Cox and Reverend Gibb and the community with Highland and all, I really, to this day, remember and thank every one of you all for what you have done for my daughter Nancy, who is now working and she lives in Pulaski, Virginia, and she works in the home nursing, and she's doing real well. And I can't explain the comfort and the love that's shown to us, and I never will forget. And I thank everyone.
How long was she in a coma?
From November, from August to October.
In a coma.
She was in a coma in a bad car wreck.
Yeah.
But,
Thank you.
like I
Is,
said,
has everybody heard, okay. Does anybody else have anything else that they, comments they want to make about, yes, David?
I would just like to say that how important the church has been to our family, and particularly Ruby and her Sunday school classes that meant so much to our. My wife couldn't do it because she said she wouldn't get through it without crying, so she left it to me.
Yeah.
It is a wonderful celebration, and it's so nice to be able to honor those that came before us and those that are here today. And, thank you to all. Thank you to Ruby. And such a nice impact.
Yes, thank you.
I'm 63 years old and Ruby taught me and her boys in Sunday school too.
Does anybody else have any?
I
Yes.
didn't say one thing that I think is probably one of the most important parts of Beulah Church and the members is we're not only a congregation, we're a family. We are a church family. And when one member hurts, we all hurt. And I know by losing family members what that support meant to me. And I like to think that we give that to, well, I know we give that to everyone else too. And it's very important.
More? Yes, sir. This is Bill North, the moderator of Shenandoah Presbytery.
I'd like to thank all of you, for those of you I've met, for such a warm and welcoming invitation to come here today to celebrate with your 150th anniversary. So I bring great greetings and blessings from the Shenandoah Presbytery. I do serve as moderator this year, which is a great gift that God gave me the opportunity, tapped me on the shoulder and said, we think you need to serve. And so I do that with great blessings. I'm a ruling elder from Berkeley Springs Presbyterian Church in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia. And we too will celebrate our 150th anniversary this fall. So I invite you all to come up to Berkeley Springs if you'd like. Sometime this fall, there'll be more information coming out. But what a wonderful occasion, what a great hospitality, what a vibrant church. And you have great experiences that you're sharing that mean you will have another 150 years. So blessings to all of you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else have any comments? We'll continue with hymn number 154. And after that, Fletcher will do the benediction.
If you have one of the programs, we're going to use it, please. There's a benediction there. It's the Aaronic benediction from Numbers in the Bible. And I'd like for us to say this to each other. The Lord bless thee and keep thee. The Lord make his face to shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. The Lord lift up his countenance upon thee and give thee peace. Amen.